Well, good day folks. Today we're in my shop in the city and we're going to be building a portable power pack that you can take with you camping to charge phones and all that sort of thing. You find that you know, in our modern day, camping goes a lot better if you have a little bit of power to charge up phones. That's good for communication. You know, you're going to need to communicate with folks, or you want to, and lighting is another thing that we find when we're living off grid. Those are the two things that we really need our power for, is communication and lighting. Those are really nice things to have that power. So we're going to build ourselves a little portable 35 amp hour battery pack that's going to be solar chargeable and have USB charging and a little car charger port and have a voltmeter and maybe even a little light on it. So come on along, we'll do this. There's a bunch of these online. This one's going to be super simple, very easy, pretty basic kind of a thing. So let's have a look and see what we can do. So we'll have a look at some of the tools we're going to use and some of the components of the portable power station. Let's start with components. So obviously first there is a 50 caliber ammo box, cheap ammo box from Princess Auto. I think it was like 15 bucks or something. You can find them on sale sometimes for 10. So 50 caliber ammo box that fits that 35 amp battery pretty well. So we'll also have a 35 amp battery, which we'll show you when we put it in there. Other components. This is a little fuse block. So the little fuse block is to wire everything to, wire the power to, and then wire out to all the different individual components of the box to make sure that they have a fuse. We have a tiny little light. Little LED light that's going to go on the outside of the box, sort of turning the whole box itself into a small little flashlight. So we have that. Also from Princess Auto, as is the fuse block itself. Okay. Then we have these other components. We have a little voltmeter. So the little voltmeter is going to tell us where the battery's at and what kind of voltage we've got. We have a 12 volt cigarette lighter adapter kind of style plug. And then we've got a USB plug with a 1 amp charger for your iPhone. And a 2.1 amp charger for your iPad, and that sort of thing. That comes with a switch as well, so it does have a little switch. We are going to need 1 or 2 other switches as well for our other little lights and a couple other little components. And then those guys all come in this handy dandy little plate that will go on the outside of the box like that to make it all look nice and neat. All right. When we get into the concept of charging this thing with a solar, so that it is a solar generator, we can start to add in the solar charge controller. This is just a really simple charge controller that comes with most of those Coleman panels, which I have a bunch of. So that's what I use. We're going to have a bunch of blade connectors. So these blade connectors are what most of these things are taking. So that's what we'll be using to wire things up. We are using 16 gauge wire for most of the components. We'll be using a heavier gauge wire. This is an 8 gauge. It's just what I have. It's pretty heavy duty, probably more than what we need. But just to go straight from the battery to that guy, we'll go with a heavier gauge in there. I think that's about it for components. Pretty close. If there's something else, I will bring it up along the way. So on to tools. So the tools we're going to use, we're going to need a drill, And for most of the holes we're going to punch in this thing, one of these step bits is really useful because you can make all sorts of different size holes with the one bit. So that's kind of a handy thing, pretty useful to be able to just not have to keep switching out your bit all the time. These guys are a little bit bigger than that bit can do, and so we'll be using a hole saw for that one. So that hole saw will be for those 4 holes. And then we'll use a smaller drill bit probably for the actual holes in here. So I think that's about it for that. Other components or other tools we might end up needing. We're going to need some wire strippers, a couple different options. These are kind of a heavier duty wire stripper. That's kind of a cheap $4, $2 one from Princess Auto, so 2 different types there. And then that's also a wire stripper and crimper, and that'll do the crimping on the bottom there for crimping our ends. So that's that, and then we've got a number of different fuses that we'll be using for different components depending on what kind of draw we think they're going to be pulling. I think that's it. So I think we can start marking out where all of this stuff is going to go and get started. So the only thing left to do is get started and have a beer. So let's do it. Okay. So first things first, what I would like, the battery takes up a good amount of this box, probably from there back. I can't remember exactly what the length of the battery is, but it's a good sized battery. So it's going to take up a chunk of this box. So we want to mount most of the things right up at the front of this box, or we could reverse it and put the battery at one end or the other. Now that does cause it to tip a little bit like this, but we can live with that. So I think what I want to do is mount everything on the front if I can, nice and clean, and I like the way that seems to fit right in there. So I think we will try and get that mounted there, and then have everything in that spot there. The fuse block will go on the inside, and all the other guys fit inside of that. And I think this little light we will put up on the side here. Yes, up on the side here, and then it'll be shining off the side of it like that, as opposed to trying to find another space for it up front. I think that'll be just fine off the side. Okay, so let's start drawing some of this stuff out. So Sharpie marker is a good friend for that, and we'll see if we can do this as in camera as possible without messing up the look of it. So I'm just going to eyeball sort of straight and level compared to the bottom and other things, and even. There we go. Okay, so there we have that part marked out. You can see, and I think we can do that to drill those out. Now this one, there's not a lot of components to mine. I'm keeping this one pretty simple. I plan on doing a bigger one at another point, sort of a more major size, but for this one we're keeping it pretty simple because this is kind of my test one, and it'll be a good one just to have. This will be a good one just to have for camping or for a backup or that sort of thing, or just to keep in the truck kind of thing. There. Okay. So I think we can drill that stuff. The only other one we're going to need to drill is this guy. And that's going to go on the inside of the box, like so. So when that's inside there, we'll need a couple of holes for that. I think the best way to do that is just use a punch. Try and do this so you guys can see sort of what I'm doing, but that should work. Okay, let's find a drill bit that's going to work for those. That first guy looks like it for that one. And we'll work fine for that one as well. Perfect. Good to go. Let's start drilling. Yeah, looks about right. So the nice part about these things is they do tend to clean up a lot of your mistakes. These guys, those plates, they'll allow you to sort of make a bit of a mistake and still get away with it. And you can just clean up the edges with a knife or what have you. A little bit. There's that grommet in, and find that light. There it is. There. Just like that, nice and clean. As we said. Okay, I'll put in another, I forgot the one other thing, I need to put in a switch right beside it to turn it on and off, so I will do that as well. There we are. And there's the switch. Easy peasy. Now, see if we can get this guy mounted. I've got some hardware here. Just some little screws and washers and such. The mounting hardware did not come with these, so this mounting hardware that I'm putting in here is just stuff I had lying around. If you don't have stuff lying around, you have to go get some. Okay, so I've got these little washers and lock washers and nuts to go on the inside of these particular guys. Just to keep that faceplate on. Just like that for now. And let's see, it's nicely mounted on the inside now. Okay, so now that that guy is mounted, we can start to mount these guys. So you can choose wherever the 4 spots you want to put those. It doesn't really matter. So you can sort of choose whatever you like. So once you've got everything kind of where you want it, like so, then you can start to put in the rings. These little guys will screw on the back of each of those, and that sort of tightens it down to the box and holds everything in place. Now, I'm not too concerned about this being terribly watertight. If you were concerned about that, you could put a piece or a little dab of silicone around the outside of everything before you screwed it down like this, and that would sort of help to keep everything a little more watertight. Like I say, I'm not too worried about it. I'm not convinced that any of these components in here that I've purchased off of eBay and Amazon or whatever, you know, no-name stuff, actually has any real waterproof, you know, capability anyway. So we're just going to make a fair weather box here, and we'll not use it in the rain. And if it is in the rain, then we'll have it under shelter, like where I would be sitting under shelter. And that's how we're going to deal with that. So, like I say, once you've got all of those things screwed in, then we'll get that fuse block in, screw that in, same way we did the other one, just drill the holes and bolt it to the front, and then we can do some wiring. So maybe I will get back with you here when we start doing the wiring, okay? Okay, so now that we have our fuse block in and all our little accessories mounted, now it's time to start thinking about the big job, the wiring. So first things first, I need to take a heavier gauge wire. Now this is maybe a little overkill, but for the amount of amps we're going to be pulling, but that's okay. We're going to use what we have. But basically I want to run from the positive terminal to the fuse block, and that'll distribute all the power to the different fuses that we have running on our accessories. So I'm going to measure out a distance here and give myself just a little bit of extra, and we'll cut that. So, and we will, oops, strip that guy. Just like that. And we're going to do ring terminals on ring terminals like this, ring terminals, on either end, just like that. And those will allow us to hook up to both the battery and then that little fuse block. So then we're going to do the same for the ground, and I'm going to run the ground first to one switch, and then we're basically just going to loop the ground all around the different pieces and have those come back to the battery. So we're going to go from one accessory to the other, to the other, to the other as we go. And one really good way to do that is to sort of give yourself a bit of lead to the battery, go to your first accessory, and then put a little bend in it, and that's where you know you're going to need to cut it and put a little end on. Okay, then the next thing, go to your next accessory, sort of there, put a little bend in it, go from there to your next accessory, and so on and so forth, until you have a really good idea of sort of the different lengths that you're going to need to cut. Okay, so you build yourself one of those, that kind of a thing, from one accessory to the next, all the way around until you get to your last one. And then you can loop, or you can connect all of those, not loop them, but you can connect them one to the other, to the other, to the other, chain them, I guess. Chain them all the way to that negative terminal, and that'll give you your negative. Okay, so we have finished our ground bus here. Very strange looking thing. But essentially we'll go from the battery, and then that'll run to all the different components and give us our ground for all the different components. So I've used these little, if you can see those, but they're these little splitter connectors, and you basically hammer down this little guy once you've got two wires in one side and one coming out the other, and then you can split your wire, and then this just clips over like so and clips. I don't know if you can see that very well, but that's what I've used for sort of splitting off from the main to all the different pieces. So let's get that connected, and then we can start worrying about getting our fuses in there. And then I think we're pretty close to running as soon as we get our power hooked up. So let's get this hooked up to all the different bits here, and then we'll see where we're at. Okay, so we have our grounds all grounded, and so now what we can do is start to run our positives from the fuse terminal to each of the accessories. Now we're going to use a similar technique. Ooh, tape on this. That's weird. Use a similar technique to looping the power cable from one to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, in order to just save some time. So let's do that. Okay, so there's our little wiring harness for the front four accessories. We've got a switch there. We've got a USB port there. We have our voltmeter, and then we have our cigarette lighter style plug. So down the box, we've got going from the fuse box directly to that switch. On one of the poles of the switch is the battery in terminal, and that's where that goes, single, single. This one then goes from the switch on the power terminal, then goes to the next accessory, power, which is going to be, in our case, the 12-volt plug. Then the next one is going to go to the USB. Tiny fingers to work these. There we are. And finally, the last one will go down to our voltmeter. And there we are. Now, last thing to do with that one is to put in a fuse. I'm going to use a 5 amp fuse. The USB is going to use a little less than that, but I may end up using, a little more amperage coming out of the that 5-volt plug if I ever plug it into the cabin lighting system and have all the lights on and things like that. We're probably going to be pulling somewhere around 5 amps, maybe a little less. So we're going to go with a 5 amp in that one. And these are actually lighted fuses. You can see there's a tiny little, I've never used these before, but we'll see. I don't know if you can see that. There's a tiny little light on the top of it, and I think when the fuse gets blown, it should light up. So who knows, maybe I've done something wrong and we'll get to see one light up. Let's Let's hope not. So there's that. Now we're going to wire up this little light on the side, and that's going to get its own fuse as well. So let's wire that one up. That one's pretty easy. We're just going to go single, single. So that's going to be a single line going from the fuse block to that little light. As I said, for that one, we're just going to give it a 3 amp fuse because that light only pulls, I can't remember what it said here. It had the specs on it. Yeah, 0.3 watts. So at 12 volts, that's, yeah, that's a 2 amp fuse actually, so that'll work even better. 2 amp fuse. There we are. Okay. Now I think we can hook up the battery and test our system. Okay, so we have the battery wired up to the fuse block, and the fuse block should be wired all to all the accessories, and everything should be all set up. So let's have a look and see how she works. So if I flip on the switch for the 4 accessories in the front, lights come on. That's a good sign, and we get our voltage reading off the battery. So the battery looks good. And if we open up our USB ports, we can see that our USB ports are lit up as well. So that all seems to be working okay. So that's great. So that all works just fine, and we're all set there. As for our light on the side, it seems to be working as well. Here's our switch. Even the little light on the switch works, so that's a good thing. We can button it up, close everything up, and there we have our portable 35 amp power station that we can use as a backup for the power in the little tiny cabin. We can use that on a camping trip. Or what have you. So all sorts of different uses for these things. We can upgrade that as well. I didn't talk at all about the solar opportunities there, but basically my plan for the time being is to just run the solar panel into this simple charge controller that came with the solar panels. And then just the alligator clips, or the clips for the battery clips. So the solar panel will go into there, and the battery clips on there. So when I go to charge this thing, what will happen is I'll just be opening it up, plugging it in, charging it, and then this charge controller can just live in the box alongside this stuff. Push the wires aside a little bit, and that can just live inside of here. So when I want to charge it through that way, I can. The other way I can do it is get myself a DC wall wart that has above, slightly above 12 volts and say 3 amps output on it, and then put the same connector on that, and then that can plug into this as well in order to charge it. So you could charge it either way, either off of AC straight into the battery, or off your solar into the battery. So that's how we'll keep that charged, one of those two ways, and then it'll always be ready for us when we want to get going. So we're going to charge this with a 40 watt solar panel, and that brings in, I believe, 2.1 or 2.3 amps or something like that. And so if this is half depleted, it's a 35 milliamp battery. You don't want to discharge it more than half, so that would get it down to 15, 16, 17 and a half milliamps. And so if you were putting in 2, it would take, somewhere around 8 hours to get that charged. 8 and a bit. So on a hot summer day, sunny day, that would be more than enough power to get this thing charged in one day, again, if it was all the way down to 50%. So that's what we'll do. 40 watt panel, 35 amp battery, and yeah, should be good to go. Okay folks, well, that's the project. as I intended it. A couple things I should mention. One, the battery itself that I've used is just a standard, acid battery. These should be charged outdoors or in a really well ventilated area. Shouldn't be charging those inside the house. That's not good for you. So make sure you're charging that in a well ventilated area, either in the garage or outdoors or something like that. And it can spill. I mean, these ones are not a sealed battery. It's not an AGM battery. It's not a gel battery. It's not anything lithium or anything like that. It's just a standard lawn tractor battery. They are cheap. I think that battery cost me like $35 at Costco on sale or something. So they're a cheap battery, and that's why I used it. So that said, I don't intend to charge that indoors. I do intend to charge that outdoors, and I also don't tend to be swinging this thing around or laying it on its side or on its back or on its anything like that. So it's something to carry it around, and it's something to set it down and to use it, and that's all going to be just fine to use it that way. And it was an expense thing for me. I was trying to keep it cheap. The other thing I should mention is that I don't have a main inline fuse to the battery between the fuse box and the battery on the positive terminal. I will be putting one of those in, so I will be putting a inline fuse between the fuse box and the battery just in case. That's always a good idea, always recommended. So I didn't have one on me, but I will be doing that in the future. Other than that, like I say, there's a couple of upgrades that we might do just to make the solar easier to plug in and plug out. But other than that, I think that's pretty much what it's going to be. I do tend to build a much larger version of this with all sorts of extra accessories and options. But this was just sort of the test run to see how it goes. And I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. Certainly happy with how it looks. Wouldn't mind getting maybe another LED light on the other end here, or just a little bit more lighting off of it, that sort of thing. But it's been a fun little project. So if this is the kind of thing you're into, hit the subscribe button or the like button, or share the video with some friends, and comment below if you have any suggestions for upgrades, or if you saw me do something stupid. It's entirely possible. All sorts of possibility there. So, but good little thing to bring with us up to the cabin, like I say, to plug in case our power goes out there, in case the battery dies up there. We do tend to bring this battery back and forth with us to the cabin, and so now this will be a much easier way to plug that system in the winter time and keep that battery from freezing. So I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. Anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.